Coming up in today's video, a glow squid dies. Well, and we already know that, and that's not very far at all. Jeez. And then some more glow squid die. And then I get attacked by the wandering trader. Stop messing up my clips! Hello and welcome back to another episode of Truly Bedrock Season 3. Today we're going to be looking at glow squid farms, but before we get to that, let's look at all the things that I've been doing since the last video. I started off by checking out the profits at our shops. We hadn't had too many, but things were getting a little bit cramped in the profit chest, so I decided to split the chest evenly, one for Slack and one for myself. I took my profits home and decided to go for a long mining session over at the mesa to top up my ores. So I flew over to the mesa, found a nice looking cave and immediately got poisoned by the local cave spiders. So I moved to a new cave, away from the spider spawners, and got poisoned again. Moving on for a second time, I finally found a large cave system under the mesa that wasn't crawling with poisonous spiders. So I got started mining as much lapis, gold, iron, coal and copper as I could carry. Along the way I bumped into a few mobs, including a herd of zombie villagers, before stumbling across a relatively rare dripstone cave biome. So I tore the biome apart, gathering a whole bunch of dripstone and pointed dripstone before finishing off and flying home. Back at home I dropped off all of the ores into the furnace chest before emptying out the already smelted copper and stuffing it into my copper box. Which brings us right up to now.
You lose.
So in episode 22 we looked at why glow squid farms are a bad idea, and that's basically because the glow squid item really can't be used for all that much. It's used in glow item frames, which we discovered if you've got hundreds of them will lag out your world, and they're used for making glow signs, which if you've not got that many of them, they'll actually crash your world. Just like this, here we have many glow signs, and now we have many more, and now the game has crashed, which is not ideal. But just because it's not ideal doesn't mean we shouldn't make one, because making farms is fun. So let's find out how to make the best glow squid farm in the world. Which of course means coming over to my test world to determine which is the best way to spawn glow squid and which is the best way to kill glow squid. So we're going to be looking at different killing methods, including suffocation, burning on magma blocks. We're going to be looking at fall damage and seeing if pointed dripstone will help with that, and of course we're going to be looking at using trident killers as well so that we can take advantage of the looting effect. However, before we can find the best way to kill them, we're going to have to find the best way to spawn them for each one of these methods. So if we're going to be looking at the best way to naturally spawn glow squid, the first thing we should probably look at is the official spawn rules that are built into the game. And we can do that by looking inside the vanilla behavior pack, in which it says that glow squid, as of Minecraft 1.17.10, which is what I'm currently playing, spawn underground, which means they need to have a solid block above them. They spawn underwater, which means obviously they need water, and the height filter is interesting because they will only spawn below Y64. So if we're in an area of the world where there's a whole bunch of passive mobs around or areas that they can spawn, we're not going to get too many glow squid spawning, which could be a problem. But the good news is, however, that we're not just limited to oceans or rivers. We can actually build this thing literally anywhere in the world. But we'll get to that later. Right now we're just going to focus on how we actually spawn them in the game. So in order to test this properly, I have come to a void world, which means there is no grass around for passive mobs to spawn on to take up the mob cap. I've put a roof above us because glow squid need a roof above them to spawn, and I've put a platform down here which happens to have a wandering trader on it all of a sudden, which we're going to be using as our spawning platform. And what I've also done is created an incredibly simple glow squid farm, which is probably the simplest type of glow squid farm, which is going to act as our baseline or our control. Stop messing up my clips! Go away! You weren't invited! Shoo! I should stop him coming back. Anyway, yes, control. So if I stand on this glass block above this glow squid farm long enough, we will eventually see glow squid spawn just like that, and they will float towards the middle, they'll take suffocation damage, and their items will go through that hopper line and into the chest. So this is basically the easiest glow squid farm that you can make. And speeding up the game so that we can see this happening a little faster will show that this is probably not the fastest farm in the world, but it does work okay, and we do eventually get glow squid drops, but not all that many of them for having stayed up there quite a long time. And having now run a couple of tests on this thing, there are a couple of changes we need to make. The first is to put a lot of light round, because we're getting quite a lot of axolotls spawning in this thing, which is reducing the rates. And the other thing that we need to consider is the fact that the glow squid don't actually appear to be spawning in the flowing water, which I believe they did. So I'm going to test this by waterlogging all of the flowing water with leaf blocks, because nothing should spawn on those, and then doing the test again. And after a few minutes of running the game at ridiculously high speeds, I can see that no glow squid are spawning using this method, which means that this farm will work. However, the amount of spawnable spaces are greatly reduced because we only have 2 strips of water source blocks. However, we're going to run the test anyway, which means using this clock, which I showcased on my mushroom farm video. But to quickly demonstrate what this clock does, when I flick this lever, this command block will turn mob spawning on, meaning glow squids can spawn. And once this full sugar box has completely transferred through this hopper into this empty one, this comparator will turn on, turning off mob spawning and illuminating this lamp, meaning that we can tell that the clock has finished. So all I need to do is flick that, very quickly go up to the AFK spot, and then just use Cheat Engine to speed up the game. So here we go, we got Speed Engine here. I'm going to enable the speed hack, turn it up to 50, go back into the game, and hopefully we should see a few glow squids spawn in. There we go. And now the light has gone on, you can see this thing's finished, which means I can disable the speed hack, and I can go back down and see how many glow squid items we got in the chest. And we got 16, which is not very many. Now, from my calculations, it takes roughly 11.5 minutes for this shulker box to completely go through there, which means we get 16 items per 11.5 minutes, which works out at around about 83 items per hour, which isn't that great. And having now run this test a few more times, I can tell you that on average, this farm generates around about 100 items per hour, which is really not that much, but it is very, very easy to make. But we're not interested in the easiest farm to make, we are interested in the best farm to make, and the way we're going to determine that is by doing some more testing. You see, I want to know, will squid spawn and die in 1 block high water? And if they will do that, will they spawn and die in 1 block high water with rail underneath? And will they spawn in 1 block high water with magma blocks underneath? And will they spawn in 1 block high water, or just in water in general, with no blocks underneath? And if they'll do that, how far do they need to fall in order to kill them? And then if they do that, how far will they need to fall with dripstone underneath them in order to kill them? Well, and we already know that, and that's not very far at all. Jeez. Really not very far. That many blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 blocks! Jeez, that's not very far at all. Okay, so the first test is, will they spawn in 1 block high water? And we can see the answer to that is true. Now, will they die in 1 block high water? I believe they will, because they did in my truly Bedrock world, and there you go, you can see they're suffocating there. So it would be really easy just to put a minecart rail underneath that in order to collect all of the items, and there we've got quite a simple farm with lots and lots of spawning spaces, which should be pretty fast. So test number 2 is, will they spawn in 1 block high water with rail in there? And yes, they will, which means that they will suffocate and the hopper minecart will pick up the items, which means we've got a very simple compact farm. So then by combining the magma blocks with the rail, we should be able to get even better rates, because the glow squid should die more quickly. But as you can see here, the magma blocks don't actually make any difference. The glow squid will continue to swim on top of the rails, not taking any damage from the magma blocks, which means they will only die from suffocation eventually. So the magma blocks don't make any difference. Which leads us to an interesting couple of tests. Basically, what's going to be better? A farm where they will suffocate and their items get picked up by the hopper minecart, or one where they're going to die on magma blocks? And again, we've got a hopper minecart track underneath that's going to collect the items. There's only one way to find out. Let's run some tests. So after running 4 tests on each farm, here are the results. And I'm sure you've already guessed it, but yes, the magma block farm is superior to the drowning farm or the suffocating farm by quite a substantial amount. The suffocating farm gave us around about 5 stacks per hour on average, whereas the one on magma cubes or magma blocks gave us over 9¼ stacks per hour, which is almost double. Now, so far, all of the tests we've done has given us answers we could have probably guessed because, well, we already know roughly how spawning works on Bedrock Edition and we kind of know how squids are going to behave from the normal squids we've got in the game. But one thing I would like to know is, can we get squids to spawn above an air gap so that we can use the fall damage thing? Because then if we can do that, we can probably kill them off even quicker. Now, having squid spawn in a tank full of water above signs or something like that is a mechanic that's existed on Java Edition for a very long time. But on Bedrock Edition, aquatic animals such as squids and fish tend to spawn relative to the block below the water rather than the actual water source itself. So it hasn't really worked. But there are a lot of non-full blocks in Bedrock Edition now which can hold water above them, which could technically be classed as a full block by the glow squid potentially. So will any of these work for spawning glow squid above them? Well, trapdoors didn't work, so now I'm about to get rid of those and try signs. And with all of those signs in place, it's time to go up to the AFK spot, which is right up here. Speed up the game and see if anything spawns, which I'm fairly confident that it won't. And it didn't. But what about lightning rods? Will those work? They're a new block, and again, standing above and speeding up the game, you can see that those don't work either. In fact, sadly, nothing I've tried will work, so we are going to be stuck with one of these sorts of designs, I guess. But one more thing I want to know about this sort of design is, will the depth of the water affect the rates? Because all of the tests we've done so far have all been 1 block deep, which is fine because it works, but maybe it would work better if it was a lot of blocks deep. So I've filled up the tank above the one that we had before that worked very well, and I'm going to run a few more tests and see if that makes any difference at all. So I ran another 4 tests on water that was 8 blocks deep. And the results might surprise you. Well, that made an absolutely ridiculous difference. Having more water for them to spawn in gave us an absolutely ridiculous amount more. 20 stacks per hour as opposed to 9¼ stacks per hour, which is 1,726 items per hour. I want to try even more water. So now I'm running the same test with 16 high water and it's working pretty well. However, I am having to AFK at the side now because AFKing above this thing didn't really seem to work out. And you may already be able to tell that due to the fact that the glow squids are having to fall down quite a long way and it takes them some time, this is substantially slower than having 8 blocks. However, at 14 stacks per hour, it's still quite a lot better than just having 1 layer of water, but compared to having 8 layers of water at 20 stacks per hour, this is the best. Now I could now go and work out the exact number of layers of water to get the most optimum performance, but I'm not going to. In fact, that's your homework. I'm going to ask you guys to do that, and if you can let me know in the comments which the best number of layers of water is for the best results on this farm, I would be very interested to know. But for now, what we do know is that having a magma block farm with a few layers of water in is by far the best and fastest method for spawning squid, or at least glow squid, on Minecraft Bedrock Edition. There are a couple of other things to take into account. Obviously, this is just a 1 chunk farm. It is 16 by 16 blocks across, and we could make that bigger and get more spawn spots, which would mean more squid. However, we do need to be careful about the size we build this because they are going to be needed to be built underground, which means we're going to need a perimeter. And the bigger the farm, the bigger the perimeter, which can make life difficult. Now, if you can cast your mind back to the beginning of this video, I did mention there were a couple more killing methods I'd like to try. One being dropping the glow squid from a height onto dripstone, and the other one being a trident killer. Now, the one from a height is not going to work because we've already discovered that we can't really get the glow squids to drop down from anything, but I do have a plan for the trident killer. However, for this one, we're going to have to think a little bit outside the box. And that's because although it is possible for glow squid to be pushed by flowing water, it's going to be very difficult to get them to spawn because they won't spawn in flowing water. They will spawn in the edges here, but that means there's only 4 available spawning spaces in this whole 10 by 10 grid. So the rates of them spawning would probably be too slow. So how do we get them to spawn faster and still move them to a position where we can drop them into a Trident killer? Now, in order to answer that question, we need to come back to the Truly Bedrock server, and in particular, the fortress farm that Slack and I built earlier this season. And yes, I am on a creative copy. This farm works because the structure, which is the fortress, has some very, very specific spots where mobs will spawn. And at these spawn spots, we have minecarts that go along powered rails and pick them up, and then they go over activator rails, which then drop the mobs off down the holes, and underneath those, there are lots of Trident killers. So we can be very specific where our mobs get delivered to. And we have already learned from today's experiments that the minecarts will travel underwater, although there's no water in here at the minute because it was affecting rates from the other tests we were doing. So, knowing all that, we could potentially create something like this. Now, I haven't actually tested if this works yet, but potentially all of these areas here are spawnable spots for glow squids. And we could then grab ourselves a minecart, pop that down at the end there, and that's going to go whizzing backwards and forwards and knocking out whatever entities are in it on those powered rails. So if we put a glow squid there, it's going to pick it up and hopefully it will deposit it somewhere. Although it doesn't seem to be doing a very good job of that. Now, that's probably because activator rails are very specific where they will drop things off, and I haven't really put any planning in to find out the exact place to do that. But in theory, if we can force them to go down that hole, we could put a Trident killer underneath and get many glow squid or ink sacs or whatever they're called. The good stuff that we're after, basically. And after not too much time at all, I've already got this system working so that it will effectively drop glow squid off down the hole on both sides, which is absolutely great. And after a little bit more time, we end up with something like this, which works pretty well. The squids obviously will spawn in between the rails like that. They'll get picked up and deposited down these holes in the middle. And then all we've got underneath that is just some flowing water streams pushing the squid down a hole into a Trident killer. And if we were to use a looting sword, we get many drops. So I suppose the question now is, how does this perform, and is there any way we can make this any better? Well, in terms of making it better, I thought we might be able to steal the concept that we had earlier in having the water a lot deeper and using magma blocks instead of to kill the squids faster to actually suck them down onto the rails and into the minecarts. But unfortunately, it seems that when you have rails on top of magma blocks, you no longer get the bubble columns. Although the bubble columns don't seem to be working very well at all. If I put that in there, we get them, but then when I put the rails on top, the bubble columns disappear. Which is sad news. So I guess that just leaves us with rate tests for this farm to see if it's any better using Looting 3 than the ones we've done earlier. So I suppose I better do it. So again, I set the timer and ran 4 tests to see how this thing would go, and here are the results. So this design gave us on average about 1070 items per hour, which is around about 17 stacks per hour. Which isn't bad at all, however, due to how complicated it is and how complex it is, it's a lot less than the simple farm that we had over here, which was just magma blocks with minecart rails underneath, and 8 blocks worth of water above, which gave us 20 stacks per hour. So I guess it's probably best to stick with what's simple. So now that we know the best design, I guess the next question is, where are we gonna build it? Which brings us back to the actual Truly Bedrock server by the lake, looking at where the oh, they're gone. Jeez. Right, anyway, yeah, so where are we going to build it? This thing would need to be underground, which means we would need to make sure that the perimeter around it couldn't spawn any passive mobs and had no water in that other glow squids could spawn in, which sounds a little bit tricky. However, coming down to the bottom of the world might not be a bad idea, because that means the chances of passive mobs from spawning are very low, because it's mainly just blocks above our head between us and the surface. However, if there are pockets of water around, we may still get some axolotls and glow squids spawning around us near here, so we would need to go round the caves making sure that we got rid of any pockets of water. Additionally, if we were underneath an ocean which was pretty deep, then chances are that we'd get fish and things spawning above us, which would also reduce our rates. So where else could we go? Well, the best place to put your glow squid farm is, in fact, the Mesa, or the Badlands, and the reason for that is because passive mobs don't spawn here. You see, again, looking at the game code, most passive mobs have a biome filter, and the biome that they require is animal. Now, that might sound strange because there aren't any animal biomes, but what that actually means, if you go to a biome, such as the plains biome here, it has a tag at the bottom that says animal, and any biome with the tag animal will spawn passive mobs. But if we look at the mesa and go down to the bottom of that, you will see there is no animal tag, which means that most passive mobs won't spawn at the mesa. But we know from our glow squid spawn rules that they don't have the biome tag, so they'll spawn in any biome. Which means providing that we're below y equals 63 in this area, we will guarantee that we will get glow squid spawning and nothing else to affect our rate. And just to prove that, I have made a very rudimentary spawning box for the glow squid, and you can see that they were spawning just there, and we have glow ink sacks down here, which means we can build one of these on Truly Bedrock. Now obviously I'm in a creative version of Truly Bedrock yet again because, well, I'm not prepared to come and build this farm over in the Badlands yet. So I guess I better get prepared. And I will get prepared, but sadly not in this video. I'm going to do it between videos because unfortunately that's all I've got time for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it useful. It's a little bit different from my usual ones. And if you did, please do leave a like. And if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing. And hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.